Welcome to the Connected Growth Coaching Podcast, where we support women to rediscover who they are so they can thrive in all parts of their lives. Your hosts, Jen Heilman and Amanda Kingsley, share with you unique life coaching resources centered around the power of the mind and the ancient practice of feng shui. All right, here we go again.
All right, welcome back.
I feel like in some ways this is like Jen and I have done so much work together in the last week. And sometimes for anyone who's listening who has a business, when you put an idea out there, it's the actual doing and creating that, like, don't you feel like it opened so many doors?
Right. Yeah.
Like
making the decision, deciding to move in that direction, and then boom, everything just kind of exploded from there.
Yeah. We decided we were going to launch a podcast. It was kind of scary.
Yeah.
We figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we got it out there, like all this clarity started rushing in about where our business was headed and how we were working together and what you all most need and want and are asking for. And just like such a gift. So for anyone, I guess it's not just entrepreneurs, but anytime you commit to something and really go for it and put yourself out there, whether you're going to big fat fail or not, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And it's leading, even if you end up failing that initial intention, it's leading you towards the thing that you were supposed to be doing anyways, right?
Failing forward.
So
I brought that up because I feel like we have so much new clarity, and a lot of that is going to be directly related to this podcast and who our listeners are. And we've really zeroed in on the audience that we can best serve. And how we can best serve them. And we have so many new amazing things coming to you.
Exciting.
So the thing we're most excited about talking about on this podcast, and the audience we most expect to resonate with it are mothers.
Yeah. Moms.
Mm-hmm. Moms. So
all the stages of motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really funny to me because I remember Jen and I went to an event. It was an Amber Lillestrom event when she was just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove there together. It was like just over an hour.
Yep.
And we came home and we were both like, oh my gosh, we had like this clarity about what we wanted to serve to women.
Right.
Like how we wanted to support women in the world.
Right.
And that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah. Exactly.
So,
yeah. And just to be clear, we didn't decide to work together.
No.
This is new. The working together is new, but we had directions about who we were going to serve independently.
And it's kind of like a breadcrumb moment for me. Like we had that clarity. So you'd think it would be obvious that like things would have taken off from there, but it was just one of the pieces of the puzzle that led us here. We didn't work together at all until this year.
Right.
But we had talked about working together to serve. No, we hadn't. We had both talked about the fact that we wanted to serve mothers.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Then we came together to work together and didn't necessarily market to mothers.
Yeah.
That wasn't super clear.
Mm-hmm.
Then the pieces just kept falling together and we launched this podcast and we were like, holy moly, we know exactly what the next step is.
Right.
So a huge part of that next step is talking about the stages of motherhood.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about the feelings of motherhood.
Feelings of motherhood. So good. There's so many. There's going to be many podcasts.
So many. And what's really interesting we're finding is that the feelings of motherhood are so similar to
entrepreneurship. Yeah. So how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so the big epiphany for us today was Oh yeah, I feel that way in motherhood, and I feel that way in my business and around making decisions and all of the things that come your way. And so yeah, it's huge. So there's no doubt that a lot of our audience are mamapreneurs, right?
So some will be entrepreneurs, some will be moms, and many will be mamapreneurs. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a lot of value, a lot of resource, a lot of suggestions around the discussion of motherhood and what are those stages. Like, we've kind of defined the broad stages as pregnancy and birth, which includes postpartum, sending your kids to school. Like, there's a huge transition in motherhood when you send your kids to school. Sending them to middle and high school, another big transition.
Huge transition.
And then college.
Right. Off into the world.
Yeah. So that's the big empty nest.
And same thing with business, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like the birthing of the business and the creating, and then the, like launching the first program and, setting it off into the world. Yeah. So many similarities.
So really, really cool. All that to say, this week's podcast, we're going to talk about one of those feelings of motherhood. And we're going to spend the next many weeks talking about more and more feelings that come up for us in motherhood.
And the situations they create.
And then what we do about it.
Yeah.
Because that's the magic of this podcast. We could all get on and talk about all the feelings of motherhood, and mothers are really good at that. They're really good at getting together and talking about their feelings.
Right. But working through them to the other side.
What do we what do we do about it? Yeah. How do we break through? How do we feel better about it?
How do we grow? How do we expand from that place, right? Rather than being stuck in the cycle of going around and around and around. How do we use these feelings, these situations to grow,
bring meaning to our lives.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so feeling number 1 today is all about making the right decision, right? So what are the top themes of making a good decision or making the right, and we're using like air quotes here, what the right decision.
Right.
So yeah,
fear of regret, right? That's
a big one.
Huge, right? It's not only about the regret, but it's also about, how you show up in the world. Like, are you going to be judged for it? And, all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's massive. And
I wish I made a different decision. Am I going to get stuck in something I don't want to be stuck in? Which goes right along with another big fear in decision making, which is fear of commitment. So for me, those two are like, pretty hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, am I going to be able to commit to the decision that I made regardless of outcome?
Right.
And so part of that is like having your own back. Like, Jen and I were talking about this a little bit as we created the content for you. And we both just in the last 2 years or couple years have made some big school transitions.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge with our kids.
Yeah.
And so choosing to send your kid to a particular school stirs so many feelings.
Yeah.
Like, what if I regret it? What if they regret it? What if I make a decision and want to change my mind? Like, am I committed to this decision?
Right. The ripples it sends out into the community and the judgment that you get from it. And exactly. The sticking to your guns and
what are other people going to think?
Right.
Like, am I choosing my family over what affects the larger community? Like, so many big decisions. And you could get lost in those for days. You could get lost in those forever.
Yeah, I was going to say years. The entire time they're at the new school, you could get lost in it. Or
you can decide, like, I'm going to do, this is another theme of making good decisions, making the right decision, is deciding to follow your intuition rather than the masses.
Right.
Sometimes your intuition is with the masses. Sometimes it's not. But so you take away the regret and make the commitment. by committing to what you believe is going to be
best.
best for your kid, for you, for the greater whole. Like, what's in the highest good.
Right.
And it takes away that fear of regret, because you know you have your own back. You know you're going to figure it out no matter what. You know that even if you made a mistake, you made it with the tools that you had, which is like, everything I believe tells me this is the right choice, and I'm going to follow through.
Right.
I'm not going to allow regret. So even if I change my mind,
right,
I'm not going to be consumed by regret.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think that is huge, right?
Huge.
Because you are going to make decisions that lead you in a certain direction, and then when you get there, you realize, this is not working out, right? And so then you use your tools to make the next decision. And sometimes it brings you back around to where you were originally, but you learned some things along the way. You learned invaluable things along the way.
Sure.
Right? And so when you come back, even if you feel like you're back where you started, you're not, right? You're like, I like to think about it.
Such a good point.
Right? I like to think about it not going in a circle, but like going up in an upward spiral. So you're going up. I know I'm using my finger and talking to Amanda and showing her, but going in an upward spiral, and landing at a higher level, coming around. So
it's growth. It's just human evolution.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We will make decisions that are so good, and we will make decisions that are not maybe on the right path. But we can choose, like, in this moment, to never regret one of our decisions ever again.
Right.
And to not be wishy-washy about it.
Right, exactly. And when you make a decision and when you commit to it, you really, it puts you in a place where you're like, okay, we're going to go from here, and whatever comes our way, we're just going to, even if it ends up being the wrong decision, it's put you on a different path, right?
Yep.
And that's what you needed, because it wasn't working out before. Whatever led you there, right, wasn't working before. So it put you on a path to create a new situation.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to shake it up a little before you come back and appreciate where you were before. Or there's so many elements, but if you can commit to not having regrets and commit to really owning your decision. Just like, I'm going to own this. Even if Jen and I had launched the podcast and no one subscribed, no one downloaded, no one listened, no one sent us amazing reviews and ratings. Thank you all.
Yes. So exciting.
Holy moly. Like, you were a part of this story. We would not have been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. That was the dumbest move. We would have been like, oh, that's interesting. We learned from that.
Right.
We wouldn't have regretted it.
Right.
We would have seen it as a piece of our growth. And that just changes the game so much. So much. So I guess before we take a break, that might be it. The only other piece of making a decision I think that's really important, is when you put yourself in front of too many choices. So that's a big piece. It's like, overwhelm can be really intense for people who are making a decision.
Right.
So,
and it's feeling into your gut, right? And really like noticing your body and really trusting yourself again, is like knowing how to read yourself and where in your body is it saying, this is the right decision. So like having those tools
and just narrowing down that way,
right?
Like listening to what your body's saying and narrowing your choices down from, like, well, in our school decision, because we've both made this decision recently, like, are we choosing from a pool of 25 schools all over the country, or are we choosing from a pool of 3 schools within 45 minutes driving? Like, just narrowing it down and eliminating some of your choices, and knowing that if the choice is not in there, you'll figure it out.
Right.
But don't overwhelm yourself by having so many choices.
Right.
I lived in Europe for a little while in college, and like, I was blown away by the difference in grocery stores. I'd be like, they have 2 kinds of milk and 2 kinds of cereal. We have like an entire aisle of bread. And they're like, here's the bread.
Right.
Would you like wheat or white? And not that there aren't grocery stores in Europe that also have a lot of choices, but like you come into an American grocery store, you're like, why do you need 42 different kinds of white bread that each cost like some different amount of money and have some, it's like, why are we overwhelming ourselves with so many choices?
Yes.
So do whatever you can to narrow it down. Reduce your choices. Decide not to regret whatever you choose. Make a commitment to whatever you choose and follow your gut. Like, don't worry about fitting in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right.
Valid points.
We, in our podcast evolution, we also decided we're going to take a little break. Then we're going to come back and give you one journal prompt / like thing to think about. And one really powerful feng shui tip. So we're going to take a quick break, come back to you with those. Let's face it, no two lives are the same, and there are no one-size-fits-all tips and tricks. We love connecting with you on the podcast, but remember that if you want game-changing results, one-on-one coaching is where it's at. You can access our programs at connectedgrowthcoaching.com, and we will walk you through the unique circumstances that arise in your life and your home. All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Would you like me to start with a journal prompt? Or
I think that would be fabulous.
Perfect. Okay. So we kind of already talked about some of what I would encourage you to think about. But if you were to think about one thing while you're listening, after you're listening, if you were to write about one thing in what we hope that you've started the Connected Growth Coaching Journal, if you were to write about one thing, for me, it would be like for you to think about a decision you're making in your life, any decision, and walk through it. Like one of the most important questions I think for a lot of us when we're making a decision is, what's the worst that can happen? Right. Now, some people would be like, why would you focus on the worst? That is so against the law of attraction. But what it does is it releases so much weight and so much pressure. And 9 out of 10, I don't know, I want to say 10 out of 10 times, but at least 9 out of 10 times, you write down the worst or you think about the worst and you realize that it's not that bad.
Right. Exactly.
You're like, I had all this stress, all this anxiety about all the terrible things that could happen if I made the wrong decision.
Right.
But when I really think about it, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
I'll be embarrassed. I might have to make a new decision. I'll have to whatever.
But even being embarrassed is a choice, right? Like you don't have to be embarrassed if you choose not to be, right?
Exactly.
You made a choice from the circumstances that you had right in front of you.
Yeah.
And so you made the best choice for you, for your family, right in that moment. And then now you're back here, right? Yeah. And so it's, you don't have,
and that's such a good example because like, let's say you write down the worst is I might be embarrassed or I might have shame or whatever. And then that's really important to go to the next follow-up question, which is what's so bad about that?
Right.
Like, what's the worst thing about being embarrassed?
Right.
And just like keep digging and start to go like, oh, this isn't that bad. Like I can handle it. And that's the other piece of this is like, how will I deal with it if I make a decision that I decide to change? Right. Like most decisions in life are changeable. And even when they're not, they're always 100% of the time changeable within our mind.
Right. Exactly.
If we can't change the actual circumstance, we can always change how we feel about it.
Yeah. How we think and feel about it.
And what meaning we give it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You are a magical magician about flipping that. Flipping that. Yeah. You are. Perspective. Amanda is like the magician of perspective shifters. And so,
yeah, so that's what I would encourage you all to think about today, whether you actually sit down and remember, we're going to say time and time again, pen to paper, pen to paper, pen to paper.
So important.
Maybe you're the kind of person who just like free writes like no grammar, just go, 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 go. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I'm a bullet journaler. So I like to just write a stream of really quick thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're going to write down a whole story about it. Whatever it is, pen to paper is really powerful, but we know it's not always realistic.
Right.
So just think about that. Think
Right.
about a decision that's present in your life. Ask yourself what's the worst that can happen, and then recognize how capable you are of dealing with it,
Yeah.
so that it releases some of the pressure.
Mm-hmm. So valuable. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, Feng Shui Ninja, bring it on.
All right. So this area that comes up for this whole making the right decision, the area is the career area. So it's really about, keeping it's the career in the life path area, right? So it's keeping those pathways clear and open so that you're not tripping over anything, right? You're not, again, going back and regretting your decision about something
or tripping over all your choices.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's so important.
Yeah.
And it's all about, that internal gut reaction. You'll find out as you listen to the podcast. We'll get into deeper and deeper layers of feng shui, that certain areas are related to certain areas of your body. If you know anything about chakras, then the career area is related to your core chakra. And so another way of thinking about it is your gut, right? It's your gut reaction, and it's, knowing and trusting that deeper intuition, but it's that it really is about that deep knowing inside of us. And so we want to keep that energy open and clear so that we can remain in that sense of confidence about the actual decision that we're making, right? And we can also have clarity around that decision that's coming our way. So the physical things that you can do to keep that energy open and alive is making sure in your career area specifically that you are keeping any pathways open and clear. So I'm thinking about my home and where my career area is, and there's a sitting area there, but it's in between the mudroom and the kitchen. So guess what? That sitting area is a major pathway in our house, and there is a ottoman right in the center of it, and a hearth with a wood stove on it, and that is like one of the main zones where my son plays, right? So there's toys there all the time. There's little army guys, so there's many tripping hazards and stuff. So it really, for me, having that pathway, even though it's not an obvious hallway, so when I'm describing that to you, it's not necessarily like a hallway specifically, but it's, those zones that you're traveling through, making sure that that's clear and open, and that there's any form of tripping hazard so that you can access that.
And my house, I think, is similar to more like layouts for most people, where my career area is literally I walk in my front door.
Yeah.
So it's like the entrance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So for those of you, I think that's pretty common.
It's very common,
in a map. Mm-hmm. So for those of you in that situation, like for me, it's my kids' backpacks, their shoes, like paperwork, keys, scooters, rollerblades. So for us, it's like all that entryway gear. And I mean, my kids, if there's one thing they would tell you, I'm on them all the time. It's like, put your shoes away, put your backpacks away, put your instruments away, because it all just gets dropped in the entryway. I'm like, not keeping the path open.
Right.
Help me out here.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's probably pretty common for most people, that it is that space.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. In most classically laid out homes. Yeah, that is the space. Yeah.
And there's a lot of tripping.
And so it's that frustration, right? And so you're trying to avoid that frustration and the distraction, and just carrying you down a different path than you were intended to go, because that area is really about making the decision and following through, right? It's where the rubber hits the road, and you're on your way. So it's, super important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, before we wrap up, I'm going to read one of our reviews from an awesome woman
She
in
didn't
our
tell me
life.
she was going to do this.
I know. I just thought of it. We do things on the fly. I actually meant to do it at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Two things. This woman is so special to us, LV Zink on iTunes, and she wrote, twice as valuable as your average podcast. What do you get when you take one super smart lady and give her a microphone? Now double it. That's the magic inside this podcast. Both of these women are geniuses on their own, but combined, holy cow, this is a podcast I'd listen to. So I bring this up, well, first of all, to celebrate. That's awesome. Thank you, LV Zink.
Thank you.
But also the way we spread the word, the way more people are able to do the journaling and make the changes and the shifts in their life, is by more people listening. So when you can rate and review the podcast, we go into more homes, more cars, more offices, more headphones.
Yeah.
And that's what our mission is to help as many people as possible.
Right. Yeah.
So if you can help us on that mission by spreading the word, leaving a review on iTunes is like where it's at.
Magic. It's the magic.
That's how iTunes says this is a podcast worth paying attention to, and they share and you share, and we're all having a big share party. So thank you. We will do our best to read a review every week. As long as you keep them coming, we are going to thank you a million times over. All right, go dig in, write, and start clearing those pathways. Until next time.
All right, bye guys.
As always, thanks for listening. If you learned something today that can help the people in your circle, please help us get the word out by sharing. When you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, it not only warms our hearts, but it helps people find us. We are eternally grateful for your support, and we're looking forward to connecting with you next week. Until then, you can find the show notes at www.connectedgrowthcoaching.com. You can grab your journal and then get your shui on.